There's a couple of things in every organization that really has to work from top down. We hear a lot about bottom-up motivation, inspiration, bottom-up decision making, and that's all good. And I have nothing against with flattening the pyramid and getting away from big hierarchical bureaucratic organizations. I'm all for that. But somewhere in every organization, there's somebody who's at the top, who's the leader of the band, right? And that person has a couple of responsibilities that no one else has. Now he is going to, or she, and I've worked mostly for women the last few years, she is going to set the tempo and set the rules and set the policies in these two areas. The first one is ethics. Now, I want to make something very clear, and there are people who will disagree vehemently with me. There's no such thing as business ethics. Right? There's no such thing. Because a business is an organization. It's like corporations being citizens so they can give money that they can't vote. That makes no sense, all right? Businesses aren't people. They're made up of people. Right? So the business doesn't have ethics. The ethical reputation of a business is based upon what? What people do. Right? If the business knows it's got a formula for infant milk that is no good, and in the United States it's discovered to be no good, and instead of destroying it, that organization goes and takes that formula and sells it in Africa to mothers to give to their infants. Is that the fault of the business? No. It's not the fault of something called Boeing or Chevrolet or Nestle's. It's the fault of the people who made those decisions. Right? And ethical decision making begins at the top. I was fortunate enough to work for a man by the name of Jay Hammond one time, governor of Alaska, and he came into his first cabinet meeting, and we all stood up, and he told us to sit down. I was not a cabinet member, I was a staff member, but I attended cabinet meetings. And in his remarks to us for the first time, he said, we will all make mistakes during the next 4 or 8 years. And he was reelected, so it was 8. We will make mistakes. And then we'll correct and go on. And I will overlook most mistakes and give you a chance to fix it. If it's a mistake of you made a decision, it was a decision-making mistake that was wrong. I will not forgive mistakes of character. And I want everybody in here to understand that. You are my friends, or you would not be sitting in this room, he said. But I will fire you if it's a mistake of character, if it is an unethical thing that you have knowingly done or allowed to be done in your department and you knew about it. And that's where ethics begins. And then that culture has to be enforced all the way down. From the top person to the next person to the next person. And organizations can be designed by their leadership to allow for checks and balances and supervision of things to make sure there's no unethical behavior. I'll give you an example when it failed. I believe it was the Enron Corporation, where the president of the company, or the chief executive officer, we'll call him, president and CEO of the company, was also chairman of the board of directors. Well, you've got a board of directors sitting there, and their job is supposedly watching the company, including the chief executive officer. Well, if the chief executive officer and the chairman of the board are the same people, who's watching? And in this particular case, the treasurer of the company, the man who wrote the checks and made the deposits, was the same person as the controller. And the controller is supposed to report to the chairman of the board, and he's supposed to be keeping an eye on the bookkeeper. And they combined all of those and went to prison. Right? Because organizationally, people made decisions to organize in such a way to have complete power. And as Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And leaders make sure that the organization has checks and balances and people watching people. I've known a lot of political people who get elected to office such as U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, or governor. I've even known a couple presidents. But we were not on, let's just say I wasn't invited for dinner all the time. And I've known several governors who have a cabinet, right? But they also have a staff that keeps an eye on the cabinet and makes sure that things are being told to the governor straight. I helped a governor design a management information system. And I'm not talking about the highfalutin computer kind that we get these days with billions of numbers. We had a management information system that was on plexiglass charts that we could slide across the room that told us who was doing what and when it was supposed to be done and what the budget was and were they on schedule, and if there was a problem, what was the name of the person and what was the phone number that the governor could call? Right? We would not tolerate ethical mistakes. If there was a story all of a sudden sprung in the newspaper about somebody doing something wrong, there was going to be trouble in River City. We didn't want any surprises, and we didn't want any unethical behavior. So I'm going to just leave it with that. Ethics starts with the leadership, and it's enforced by the leadership all the way down. Even if it's one of your best performers, if they're doing something illegal or totally unethical, they got to go.